Greetings, fellow men. Servus Männer. It's Red Pill Germany again, and today I want to talk about the fear of the stranger, or the opposite actually. So the title of my video is of course the title of an Iron Maiden song, and I think it is about a young soldier who has some doubts about going to war and shooting people that might be conscripted just as himself. Of course, I don't mean that we should shoot any people at all. This fear of shooting strangers or these moral scruples is just a property of us European people. And generally, I think that's a good thing. I mean, we are very peaceful people, basically, and that is a good thing. So I want to put this up front here that I don't mean that we should become really savage and violent again, but the problem arises when a very peaceful group, a peace-loving group, who actually even worries about strangers, if they are sharing the same territory with people who for some reason don't think at all like that. So I was always told by my parents and my grandparents that I am not supposed to go into a car with a stranger, or if someone tries to lure me somewhere with sweets, or he says he wants to show me something or whatever. You all know these creepy stories maybe that some pedophiles or some adults might want to get hold of some children. And of course, I was told as a kid that I am not supposed to trust strangers. If someone approaches me, I should run away and cry for help, basically. So I really wonder, do parents still teach that their children, or is that considered xenophobic already nowadays? Because I think, I have the feeling, what they teach these kids nowadays is, oh, you always have to trust the stranger. You have to welcome the stranger. You have to go with him. You have to do everything he wants. And it's actually your own tribe, your own family, your own people that you have to be careful, that you shouldn't turn your back on. And this shift happened in just a couple of decades actually. But this change does not take place, or did not take place, in all sections of society equally. No. When you analyze the election results of the Austrian presidential elections just recently, you can actually gain a lot of valuable information about what segments of society are welcoming the stranger and what segments of society are still suspicious of the stranger. As you all might know, there was a patriotic candidate, Hofer, and there was a green or a communist socialist candidate on the other hand. Just like in the Trump election, but this time it wasn't enough for the patriotic candidate, you can see on the map that in the rural areas, of course, the patriotic candidate would have won. So the first thing we can see is that productive people in rural areas are much more likely to vote patriotic than in the inner cities, or in the, we call them red wine belts around the inner cities, where these richer people live. They want to be conveniently close to the cities, but of course they don't want to live in inner cities. So we call it bacon or Speck belt, or the red wine belt. And it is there where wealthy higher up government officials, teachers, lawyers, doctors and so on are living, of course, and all these social justice warrior spawn that they produce. Now that is the first thing we can see on the map already. Now the second thing is that people with higher education predominantly, I am afraid to say, vote socialist. And it is the working people, the productive people, who actually know where and how our wealth is produced, who are not busy all day spending the wealth that is produced, but who actually produce it. They are also voting patriotic. Now the next thing is, of course, that the women are predominantly voting left-wing. If only men had been allowed to vote, and there are some YouTube videos commenting on that also, if only men had voted in Austria, the patriotic candidate of the Freedom Party would have won the election. Now the other thing is also age. When you're very young, of course you're a socialist, you want personal liberties, you want transfer income, because that's what you get actually as a student, for example. You want free education, free healthcare. But something magical happens at the age of 30 or 35, when you are promoted, when you're in a full-time job, when you pay extremely high taxes, relatively speaking. Then, of course, you want a Freedom Party candidate. Oh, what a miracle. So these are all these lines, these fracture lines that I can see in society. when I look at these outcomes of the elections. And this is actually really funny because you all know maybe that in Freiburg now there was a young girl, a young medical student who has been raped and later on drowned by a refugee. And the important thing about this case is that, to my knowledge at least, this is the first case where a member of the EU elite class was directly affected by such a deed. And I almost couldn't believe what I've read in the newspaper. I mean, it's one thing for these elites to day by day read about victims in the working class and then just say, oh, these working class people, what do we care? We live in a palace, haha. But now this guy, who is a very high EU official actually, his own daughter is raped and drowned, and he still collects money, and he still is very outspoken apparently about pro-refugee campaigns. So he actually sacrificed his daughter on the altar of multiculturalism. I hope this guy knows that. This is at least my current understanding of the situation. And of course, the dead girl has also supported the refugees. She working for refugees in her free time. So she was actually a servant to those refugees in her free time. You must imagine that. And I don't know if they found it out already, but the police investigation is trying to find an answer to the question of whether or not the murderer and the victim knew each other. This is of course speculation, but maybe they had some sort of a relationship, who knows. And he's a Catholic guy, and I also grew up in a Catholic family, and I know that among very pious Catholics, this narrative of Job, for example, you know, that God is testing you with all these hardships and stuff. This is a very widespread idea, so that even when you undergo hardship and tests and all that stuff, your faith shouldn't waver. But in my opinion, at least, this guy is committing a mistake. I mean, he's mistaking the belief in God with the belief in multiculturalism that shouldn't waver in the presence of a hardship or of a test. I think he should maybe, if he wants to, he can still believe in God maybe, but he should realize that this uncontrolled, unvetted immigration is very dangerous. I hope he realized this now. But of course, there were other things going on recently. Like, for example, an African immigrant who has been living here for a longer time already. He poured gasoline over his ex-wife and set her on fire on a street in broad daylight. That's just crazy stuff. And then some minor stuff like some women being kicked down a stair in the subway. Yeah, so these are just the normal things that are happening in this country every day. No one really cares about that anymore. And it really seems to be the general idea that we have to endure that like we have to endure bad weather. Like it's a higher nature, you know, a higher power, like a natural disaster, and we just have to arrange ourselves with it. It's not like this is done by people actually, and we could stop it by, you know, kicking them out of the country or putting them in prison. No, it's just like bad weather. You just wait and it will go away, kind of. And what is so interesting is that I was really warned, as I said in the beginning of the video, I was warned by my parents and grandparents to not trust strangers. And that is a very good piece of advice, because you don't know who that is. Doesn't mean that he's a horrible person, it just means he could be and you don't want to take the chance. So now the paradigm of the present day seems to be all strangers are basically awesome angels who can't do no wrong, but the Germans, you know, or the Europeans, oh, you have to distrust them. They are dangerous. So this is at least my take on the bigger news items that we got in the last weeks. And I hope that all my brothers out there keep their natural sound suspicion, and you all be safe. Have a great day. Servus, Kameraden.